Hi again. My name is Robert Thomas DeVincentis, and I'm the author of the Book of Kings. And in the Book of Kings, there's 4 subjects that we examine and explore from the historical origins. And from those historical origins, we get aftermath science. I'm the author of the book, and I'm also the author of Aftermath Science, which is an ancient science. It's an ancient science that God had created the world, and the things that I discuss here involve the Lord. First, before we start, I always show a copy of the book. There's the book right there, the Book of Kings. It's America's Aftermath Science. Well, because I live in America, and I'm the author of it, and it's our historical formation. In God we trust. That's right, we were a Christian nation. The people came here from Europe. They were all Christians, different denominations, Catholics, Protestants, and others that came here. But the majority of the religion and everything was founded on the Holy Bible and, say, the 10 Commandments. Today we're going to be discussing the knowledge of aftermath science is the spark of all knowledge, period. Wow. How can somebody say something like that? Well, I'm going to explain, and you'll have the information. So we see again, the earth was the first thing created by God, then the moon and the stars, the chronological order. And there's a chronological order to all things that God had made. So first of all, if I say that aftermath science is the spark of all knowledge, we have to take on the greatest minds that Western civilization in our technology era lived. So let's start with the doctors. I told you my book is 40 years old from its original writings. It had different names, and eventually it became the Book of Kings. The Circle of the Earth, Science, Nature, Man, and God were the different titles. And they're all documented in the Library of Congress. And the things that I tell you now are true. Okay, let's look at doctors. Everybody heralds them as really great people, and they certainly are. They have great knowledge. However, the infancy of their knowledge or the historical origins of it has to start with God. So if we go back to the beginning, we discover that man himself wasn't created the natural way via the birth of a woman in her canal, birth canal, but rather God breathed into him after he created him out of the dirt or the dust of the earth. Breathed in him and he became a living soul. And from him, the woman was taken. And then from both of them, that's how the world becomes populated with humans. Does anybody in their science classes today or learning to become a doctor understand all that? Well, you should. So what makes a great doctor? And I said these things are already documented in the Library of Congress. Did you know that you go back 40 years ago or so, that the greatest brain surgeons and all these people were the top notch of whatever, working on somebody's brain? They thought that a man only used 5% of his brain. Did you know that? Well, in my writings and my knowledge of God, and this is where the spark comes in of aftermath science and its original historical origins, is that when God created man, he did not create any waste. There is no waste in the human body. Everything from the fingers on your hands, everything else, first of all, is in the image of God, and the mind of God we have through Christ. So that means that I said that every part of a human's brain was functional and had some reason to be there because God didn't make waste. Okay, so I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a brain surgeon, but yet I was able to discern from my knowledge of God in the Bible, which anybody could do, and realize, hey, there's something missing from the puzzle here when we talk about it. So let's move on. Let's move on to lawyers. Our Supreme Court, who gets it wrong all the time down through the centuries. Well, we've only been around a couple hundred years, well, 2 centuries anyway. But they did it in slavery. They also realized that for the position of life and these types of things, whole civilizations vanished because of the treatment of children or how they perceive life and everything else. So you have to be very careful. Where does the law come from? Well, historical origins, guess what? You wouldn't have any laws in this country if it didn't come from the 10 Commandments, stealing and all these kinds of things. You think somebody came up with that on their own? No, they didn't. And of course, the author of that, they could say Moses got the 10 Commandments from God. Well, he certainly did. But then God sends his son into the world born under the 10 Commandments. That means he's subject to the very things that God did. And of course, when I explained how God created the worlds and everything, he did it within the confinement of the 10 Commandments. And of course, I've explained in many, many details that if sin reaches the heavens, eventually it'll destroy it because it goes contrary to the creation of God. Okay, moving on to your scientists and natural nature people, and these types of people that are great in their scientific understanding of things, no doubt about it. But if you go back to the historical origins again, there's a predisposition. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, guess what? The chicken had to come first. Because after God created all the animals, he said, be fruitful and multiply. He also said that about man too. So in its origins, the predisposition of all the things bring about the same things over and over and over. So evolution, if it plays any role at all, plays a very small role in that. Okay, so let's move on to theology. Okay, people that are great. You know, Jesus left and he said, Peter, I'm going to build my church on you. Guess what? That's the Holy Roman Catholic Church. I am a historian of, historian. So I have to tell the truth. That is the truth of the matter. If you're able to check anywhere, trace your Bible back or whatever, it's going to have Roman Catholic on it somewhere in it. And broke away, did whatever you wanted to do. The sacramental life, a lot of people don't believe in that. Well, again, that's up to each individual to try to explore and try to find out why that is the truth. So moving on for theology, we look for intelligence now. Any kind of intelligence whatsoever. And again, on the theology part of it, of course, God made the world, and everybody knows that. It's recorded in the Bible. Eventually, from the Garden of Eden, we have God talking about a covenant between man and himself, and that was the Jews, and eventually the second covenant came about through Jesus Christ, which again, historically speaking, goes all the way back, because Jesus was born a Jew under Judaism, yet that's how we get our second covenant with God. So under the intellectual part, okay, so today in today's society, whoever you are, you could be a genius, you could have a high IQ, but that doesn't mean that your high IQ is formulating things that are being fed into your mind. What if the majority of the stuff that you're being fed in your mind isn't really close to being truth or half-truths and those kinds of things? So if that's part of your intellect or part of your IQ, if it doesn't have the proper understanding, well, then that part of your IQ then is worthless. It's just a bunch of things hanging around in your mind that you're taking up space with, which is okay. You could do whatever you want. Okay, so on the intellectual end of it, the greatest thing is man's inventions. He's coming up with AI, and I've explained over a period of time about AI that man is greater than AI. He's not better in the sense that he can store all the knowledge like the Library of Congress. I mean, you could Google things and get an instantaneous response. But it can't come to the chronological order of the things that I explain in my book through Aftermath Science. These things are not going to be found in AI or anywhere else Because who's feeding the information into the computer? Somebody other, or missing a spoke from the wheel, that wouldn't have that knowledge. Now, of course, a lot of times people could say, oh, you're a cocky person. Oh, you lack humility. Hey, listen, I'm not looking to make friends. I want to be your friend, but you don't have to like what I say. You don't even have to believe what I say. The fact of the matter is I present things as the truth of the matter, and the things that I talk about and I discuss. And you certainly wouldn't want somebody to tell you things if they didn't have the wholehearted belief that the things that they're really saying really are true. So what is the remedy? What is the remedy? Well, I guess you could go out and buy my book. You certainly could. A lot of people have read it. I've got feedback, and they might say, oh, gee, it's supposed to be simple, but it's complex too. But at the same time, it's things, instead of dismissing something, you could certainly pick up the Bible instead of saying, okay, I don't believe that, but then you should figure out a way why it's true instead of figuring out a way why it's not. And that's the same thing that goes about religion and everything else. And the 10 Commandments of God, you have to figure out why it's true and not necessarily why it's not true. Because a lot of times people are misled. Well, listen, I hope that you enjoy these talks. And again, I apologize if I come off a little too strong sometimes, but I only have a limited amount of time to present things. I don't write extensive notes or talk about it. A lot of stuff is right off the cuff. I don't come in here with things already pre-done. So at any rate, I hope you enjoy all my talks. And I hope that you get a chance to get a copy of the book if you like, or just listen to the talks here. Thank you again, and have a good evening.